Hey everyone, I just wanted to stop by real quick for this podcast starts and say you should like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to follow me on all my social medias at John D. Clouser, still the same name as the name that you subscribe to on this YouTube channel. So enjoy this clip, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Man, you know what? All these were pretty solid. I just killing it. Still just over here killing it. 98 episodes later.
Welcome to The John Show with your host, John Doogie Clouser.
All right. What's going on? How are you? How is everyone? Doing good? Doing swell? Well, we are here on a new episode of the Juan Solo Show, episode 89. First podcast of the new year, I believe. I believe this is the first one. Well, technically, I don't know. Was last week's might have been done on a Monday too, and so I think that was like the couple days after New Year's. But yeah, we're here. We're doing it. Can we believe it? I feel like such a homer because I'm wearing like a Rams hat, and also a Rams jersey, or hoodie. But hey guys, we make it to the playoffs. We're in the, we're the second seed. Are we the second seed? I'm pretty sure we play against was it the Cardinals. And what's so funny is and then the 49ers, the 49ers play against the Cowboys. It's people don't understand how crazy my division is. We won the division just because everyone lost to everybody. The Rams won it, and because we lost yesterday to the 49ers, and we still won the division. It was crazy. And the thing is, but we have three teams that made it to the playoffs from the same division. So that's why people talk about all the time, like Rams. Oh yeah, they pay for everyone. It's we gotta understand, you kind of have to, because everyone in our division will end up make the playoffs. It's crazy. We will all the whole damn division will we'll fuck. And plus two, it's not that hard because NFC is awful. You're really really good, or you're not good at all, because you have the Rams, and you have the Cardinals, and you have the Packers, and then you have teams like the Vikings that could be up there, but they're almost the same as the Lions. And then you have the Lions, who are just absolutely trash. But there's also this whole conspiracy theory on that, is because one, they believe this is just because you have the football gods, right? And you had Barry Sanders, probably one of the top three best running backs who ever played the game, and he retired out of nowhere. He was 10 years in. He was fuck this place, I'm done with you. And then you have Calvin Johnson, who is probably the best wide receiver who probably ever played the game. And by stat wise, I believe he's the best wide receiver to ever play the game. And they asked him to give I think $1 million or $1.5 million back to them or something like that, because he retired a year early, and so he owed them money, and they actually requested it back. And most time an organization will be okay, Andrew Luck, for example. Andrew Luck still had, I think, 2 years left on his contract, but they just went ahead and gave him the extra $10 million that was owed. Irsay, as much as he's a kind of a fucking dickhead, he does do cool things like that, and he will give a player, if they still owe they're retiring early, because I think Pat McAfee, I think he retired 2 years early. He still had 2 years left on his contract, and I think he owed the Colts $8 million, but instead Jim Irsay was yeah, just keep it, or something like that. It was crazy, things like that. But the thing is, because most organizations will just write it off, and they just because you can write it off, and two, you'll find ways to make up the money back anyway. Just because of jersey sales still, because people will still buy the jerseys, and then you can get money back just on other ways. Just there's other ways of doing it, and it only hits your cap a little bit, a little. But it being the Lions, that's one of the big things, and they say that that's the reason why I think they're going to forever be shitty until they give the money back. And you know, it's so funny too. They also had one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, Matthew Stafford, who now is the quarterback for the Rams. And he this year, Cooper Kupp had the most receiving yards as a wide receiver, and he's second all time now in a season. And the first one was Calvin Johnson, and Stafford was the quarterback for both players. So, and like he did that with the Lions. He did that with the fucking awful Lions. And as much as people talk shit about Matthew Stafford not being that good at the Lions and the fact that he never won a playoff game, but you gotta understand, like, name a defensive player. Name a player that played defense for the Lions during that time. Like he had Calvin Johnson. Yeah, that was it. But he didn't have an amazing line. He'd never had anything else. He had no supporting cast. He just had Calvin Johnson. And yeah, Calvin Johnson is a one of a kind gem as a wide receiver. Size wise, speed wise, hands wise, everything. He was just a perfect fucking athlete. So when you have that, like, of course you can just throw it to him. Like, I honestly, I could not tell you, like, an offensive lineman. I couldn't even tell you one of the running backs that they had at that time because they didn't have anyone. No one that was worth a damn. But yeah, people want to talk shit. And now you see him, like, you give him talent, and he had a winning season. So, you know, yeah, we're the second seed, but, like, you know, guess what? He's also went from one of the worst divisions, and if not just one of the worst divisions in fucking football, but one of the worst teams in football, to playing for the most competitive division in football and being on the top tier. In the top 3 teams this year on the NFC side. So, like, yeah. You get this in your division. You have to play against the 49ers, the Seahawks, and with the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Cardinals, who are now somehow fucking decent. Like, they still do Cardinal shit and they still fuck up a lot, but they're still good. They have Murray and they have, like, Hopkins, and they have an awesome defense. So it's like, their defense is better than their offensive side, but their offensive side is not that bad at all. So yeah, you're competing against it. That's just why I'm like, dude, and plus, this is the first time he's actually ever had a actual team. So he's going to throw a lot of interceptions. Granted, he throws at least 2 a game. It's hilarious. It is funny because yesterday when I was watching it, I'm like, oh, it took to like midway through the third quarter before he threw his first interception. And then the last play of the game, they lost because he threw an interception. So you live by the sword, you die by the sword with Matthew Stafford, because he has a hell of an arm, and he is not afraid to throw the fucking ball. But because he's going to throw the ball a lot down the field, you have a higher chance of getting it intercepted, and that's just what happens. But you also have Cooper Kupp, so, you know, it's going to kind of, you know, like little column A, little column B. Wow, kind of went hard about, like, what, a solid, like, almost 7.5 minutes on football. Because, you know, that's what people really want to hear about. People want to hear about, you know, football and shit. But maybe we should just probably get into, like, the main gist of the podcast. I don't even know. So funny. So, you know, every week when I do this show, I write down a laundry list of things. And usually it's right before I do the podcast when I really get a lot of like little, like, ideas of, like, oh, maybe I should talk about this. Maybe I should talk about that. Because when I'm by myself, I do this, but I'm doing this with myself. I literally am having a conversation with myself, and I'm doing it because I'm, like, kind of like rambling, ranting, kind of talking about something, trying to see, because I never like to have the first thing I say be the first thing on here. I like to have it be said out loud, and so I can at least kind of somewhat wrinkle it out and have an idea of what I want to talk about. And then if it's someone I'm like, I could probably talk about that for a while, I'll put it down as I'll put a header. And then if there's, like, little bullet points, if I really want to hit something, then I'll write them down. Most of the time, I write a bullet point and I move on. So one of the ones I wrote down was, like, the first one I wrote down was one of the things I thought about today. So I was doing some laundry and I was just thinking about these weird incidents in my family. I have a crazy, weird adoptive family. If you guys don't know, I'm adopted. Little backstory on that. So, love my family, love them to death, but they're also insane. But what family isn't insane? Everyone has, like, insane family members have insane moments that have occurred in their family, all that stuff. But probably one of the weirder ones that I learned about, this was probably, I'm pretty sure I've never talked about this on the podcast, but if I have, whatever, it's a hilarious fucking story, so I'm going to tell it anyway. Well, I would have to say this was in it's 2022 right now. When I learned about this, it had to be like 2016. I learned this. And so I was talking to my mom. And so my mother had a brother. And he was pretty well off, man. He worked for the government, I believe. He worked for the government, and then like he retired from working for the government and became a cop. And during that time when he was a cop, he was working in Washington, D.C. And he married a woman. And I guess he really didn't want to marry her. But I guess my grandmother, my mother's mom, like pressured and was like, do you really want to embarrass the family by not, marrying this woman after we've done all this stuff? We made this wedding and everything like that. And so my uncle was like, I guess I have to fucking marry this woman. Well, anyway, so she came from, my aunt, who is my uncle's wife, apparently she came from a batshit crazy family, right? Batshit crazy. And so that's what's leading up to this story, because the story is related to, like, it's part of my family, but it's not really like directly connected to the family. It's what's a family member that got, it's a member of the family that got married into our family. Well, anyway, so the mother of my aunt apparently was the most batshit crazy woman you've ever met in your life. For example, when the kids were young, when my aunt was young, her mother would take her hand, would turn like a gas fire on, like in the oven, like one of those gas ovens, would turn the flame on and put their hand over it and would slowly lower it. And then, by how, the closer it gets to the flame, they're going to start freaking out. The kid's going to start trying to push back, and then would pull it off, and then would start up top and work their hand down until they start freaking out, and then pull it off. And that's how she punished the kids. That's fucking crazy shit. That's insane. That's fucking crazy. Well, anyway, which apparently this is all alleged, of course. This is all alleged. Because my family, on my adopted family, they're all Jewish. We're all Jewish. And I think my sister and I think her daughter are Catholic, but teach calzone. Anyway, so my aunt's mother apparently was having an affair. This was back when she was in her 20s. So this was in the fucking 40s, maybe. It was let's say 1945, somewhere around there. So she was having an affair with this priest that was Catholic, this Catholic priest. And apparently the priest, she convinced the priest to kill her husband. And then there's this whole thing, and apparently a lot of family members totally blame them, we don't understand where her husband went, because yeah, this was the first husband. And anyway, that's what I know. And I feel because it was so crazy, because my mom's telling me, she's your aunt, your aunt's mother was sleeping with a priest, and wanted to start dating the priest, but the priest wouldn't date her because of the fact that she was married, but they would fuck. But I don't, so I was what the, I'm this is fucking insane. And I was yeah, dude. Then the next thing you know, I guess the priest, and she's of course, John, this is all alleged, because this is only what our family believes. And I'm what? How the fuck are you talking about? How the fuck do you guys even came to this conclusion? But I guess her husband just disappeared, and the story is that there's a creek out by I guess there's a creek, and then they threw the body out by that. There was something like that next to the Hudson. I guess the Hudson there's a creek, there's a part of it that flows out that's into the city. I don't know. That's all I know. I know It's insane. Just the fact that it even went to this far is insane. So sorry, I don't know what creek, or I just know it's in a body of water. They dumped the body in a body of water, and apparently my mother said it was a creek. That's all she's told me, because she was very vague about it in the sense of that. But she was all amped up, like what I told you, like leading up to it. But then when it led to like the actual body part of it, I'm like, what the fuck? This part of it, like, you know, this is what we've been told, and this is what we think. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? But yeah, that's insane. And I only met that lady one time. So I was with my aunt, and she was the nicest lady you've ever met in your life. Like, whenever her and I would hang out, she would always like, I'm going to go to Walmart. And I'd go to Walmart with her. And then she would buy me like a $20 Lego set. And then she just enjoyed watching me like build these things. And I would just build a Lego thing at her place. It was fucking awesome. And like, that's where I got my huge obsession of like Legos. I love Legos. Legos is one of the funnest things in the world. And that was because like that's what we would always do all the time together, is that we'd go to Walmart and then like I'd get Legos. But yeah, her mother was a fucking psychopath, and I met her one time because we were running some errands and I was with her, and she's like, hey, I have to go stop at my mother's house because because what's so funny is like my batshit crazy grandma lived in the same like this complex, this like old senior citizen complex that were like high living complex, like, and like it was very high end where it was. It was just so imagine driving into a gated community, but then like you go into these communities and you see these buildings, and it's just like a building, and it has like windows on it. And that's separated into like 4 houses, like 4 individual like apartments. And it was like you walk in, it was the living room, then like the kitchen, dining room. It had a bathroom and like 1 room, and some of them had 2 rooms like that. But that was basically it. But it was cut. It was like a big building cut into things. But like there was one here, and it was like all spaced out into this big gated area. And then there was, of course, like the headquarters, you know, the leasing office or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, and I went there once, and my aunt was like, she knocked on the door. She's like, I'm going to go inside real quick. You just stay right here. And then like, I'll go in and I'll come out and that'll be it. So I don't know who it would be. Would that be my great aunt? If it was my aunt and my aunt's mother, was it my great aunt? I would assume that's how that, I think that's where a great aunt wanted. Well, anyway, I think it's anyway instead of anyways. It's anyway. It's just singular, not plural, because it doesn't make any sense. Why it doesn't make sense being pluralized? Anyway, that makes more sense. Anyway, when she opened up the door, there was just like these piles, and of course I was a child at that time, so to me it seemed like the piles of newspapers were taller than me, but it was probably only like this tall. But still, from the ground to this tall is pretty fucking insane. So that was the only time I ever met that lady. And then I believe she ended up dying later on, a couple years later, in her sleep, and nobody went to the funeral except my aunt. And I remember going over to my aunt's place. She's like, yeah, my mother passed away. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that. I'm like, are we all going to the funeral? And she's like, no. And I'm like, okay, all right. That's insane. But yeah, apparently this lady was just a absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare. And my aunt didn't like my grandmother, which was her husband's mother, my grandmother. They did not like each other because my grandmother would come over to their house, would drive over to their house, come inside their house, and then look through their mail. Which is weird and a fucking felony. So that makes sense why my aunt didn't like my grandmother. And that was an ongoing feud all growing up, which was weird. Which is just weird, but that's just a nosy, that's an old nosy Jewish thing, I think. And so that's, dude, crazy, insane stuff. And then like my uncle. So this was my uncle on my dad's side. So my father, all of his family came from Syracuse, not Syracuse. They came from Sacramento. Completely different side of the United States. So they came from Sacramento, California. my father's whole family were Mormon, which was so crazy about that. And I think that's the reason why, like, I never interacted with my sister, or I guess my dad's sister, my aunt, and my brother-in-law that much until, like, when they passed away or when they were on their deathbeds. It was like when I saw them again. And that was like, and to tell you the truth, that was the only time I ever remember seeing them, because I guess I saw them when I first got adopted. When I first came to the States, they all came and they saw them, and then that was it. I don't know why, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were Mormon, and my father was not Mormon. And my father converted to Judaism when he married my mother, and so because my mother is not a fucking Mormon. So, and then how I found out all about that was the fact that, like, I was having dinner with my family. We're having a family dinner, and I'm like, and, of course, like, I'm, 15 years old, 16 years old, just learning on the internet and learning about, like, Mormonism. And I'm like, guys, know anything about these Mormons? Holy shit. They believe Jesus was a fucking white guy. Like, Indians were the lost tribe of Israel. Like, they were Jew. What the fuck? Indians are Jews? Like, what the hell's going on? Like, what the fuck's believing in this? Like, in this, like, guy, he read it into a top hat, and that's how he wrote the fucking Mormon Bible. I'm like, this is a lot of dumbass shit. And my dad just, like, was eating dinner. He just, like, put his fork down, put his knife down, backed up out of the table, and walked out of the room. And my mom, like, leaned over to me. She's like, so, John, you know how, people convert? Before your dad and I got married, your dad converted from being a Mormon. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's how I learned my dad was a Mormon. At one time before, I was born. Insane. I tell you guys, my family, insane, crazy, weird stories. But yeah, my dad was Mormon, and and I think that's the reason why, like, we never interacted with any of them. So until when they're on their deathbed. So when my uncle was on his deathbed, we went to Sacramento to visit him, because my parents were like, you need to know that, your uncle, and you need to, see him. And I'm like, this is not a good time to see him. Like, why do I have to see him, like, when he's dying? But he's like, so everyone, we went to this, we were at the hospital. Everyone went to get some food, and it was just him and I. And, my parents were like, this is a good time. You can sit down, you can talk to him, have a moment, get to know him. I'm like, okay. And so, he's still very coherent, but he was just tired. You could just tell that, like, the cancer was taking him. It was getting to him, and he, didn't have much time, but he was still, like, interacting, like, how you and I are talking right now. And he was like, John, I don't know what you think or what you believe in, like, the afterlife and all that stuff. And, I think about this, like, I'm 16 years old. I'm 16, almost 17-year-old guy, kid, boy, child. And I'm like, I don't know. I think there's probably something bigger. Like, I don't know. There's stars and shit. Like, there's got to be more. If they have figured out there's other universes, then there has to be something. Like, I'm like, he's like, yeah. I'm like, he's like, I think kind of the same way too, John. Because, that makes sense. And, like, I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, it'd be nice. And, like, I'm like, I don't understand what's wrong with, like, just thinking that, there is something bigger than us. And, it doesn't, it's probably not as dramatic as what we like to think it is. It's just being that's just judging every living fucking thing that we're doing. Like, he's not going to, like he's taking a tally and wrote down, like, oh, that was John's 10th million fuck that he said. I don't think he's doing that. I don't think there's anything up there doing that. But my uncle, he was like, I really do hope, though, sometimes when I've been dealing with this cancer stuff, that there is a afterlife. And when I go there, I'll be able to see, my dad, your grandpa, your grandma, my mom, my brothers. But, I just don't think I'm going to see my uncle. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I just don't think I'm going to see my uncle, because I'm pretty sure he killed someone. And he's like, you know what, John? I'm pretty tired. I'm going to go to sleep now. And he then later on passed that night when I had already left for the evening. I left for the evening, went back to the hotel, And then when I was actually in the car going back to the hotel, that's when he passed away. And then, but I was like, wow, that was weird. That was the moment that I had with my uncle that I had met. This is the second time I had met him ever. And it was so funny because he was like, yeah, I remember when I first met you, you're this small little guy. Now you're this big guy. And I'm like, I'm a guy. And he's like, you're a guy. I'm like, you're a guy. And he's like, we're all guys except her because she's a lady. I'm like, she's a lady. Swear to God, real conversation that I had with another man. This is my life. But yeah, like that was insane. That was an insane moment. And then the same thing, like when I met my aunt from my dad's mother, she was on her deathbed. She had cancer too. And she was all out in and out of it. And her whole big thing was like, she's like, yeah, I was laying here and my roommate took a shit and then was playing with it and was talking to it. And we're both like, all right, this is awesome. I'm like, and my dad was like in the car when we were eating. We left her after that. Like she went to sleep and then we went to Fazoli's and my dad was like, I apologize that my sister talked about, a lady taking a shit and playing with it. And I'm like, oh no, dude, that's fucking hilarious. I told my dad, I'm like, that was really fucking hilarious. And that was like the one time when he did not get mad at me for saying the F word. So it was, it was a good moment. My dad and I had a good time. And it was so funny. My dad and I have had some really funny, hilarious moments with each other. And then we've also had some really weird moments with like the whole Mormon thing. That was a very awkward moment that we had. And then I apologized to him. I'm like, Dad, I didn't know that you used to be Mormon. Or I wouldn't have said it the way I said it because I would have been a little bit more like, I would have read the room a little bit better. I would have actually asked you some questions then. And I'm like, can I ask you some questions? And he's like, sure. He's like, I'm like, how was being Mormon? He's like, it was fucking weird. There was no hesitation. I said like, how was it? He's like, it was fucking weird. It was weird. Because there's a few moments. My dad has dropped the F-bomb a few times and vice versa. I've dropped the F-bomb a few times with my father. And when we drop it with each other, it's very calculated. It has to be perfect. It's for the comedic effect. So that's why we don't like to use it all the time. But that's one of the things I have learned from my father was that even though I drop the F-bomb all the time now, I try to throttle back off of it, but it never fucking happens. What else do I have? Oh man. Well, we got like 2.5 minutes left in this fucking podcast. We've been doing it. We did it, man. Like, it's so funny at this point when I do these things. Sometimes the procrastination has gotten less and less because I've kind of realized that if I can just get on this podcast and I start doing it, I really have no choice. I have to talk. So once you push record, like I'm like, fuck, I'm going to have to talk for the next 30 minutes. So I might as well just sit back, relax. Don't even really think about it. Just talk. If a fucking story comes to me, look at your list. That was the biggest thing. Look at my list. I do this list for a reason. So I can I'm like, I wonder what else I want to talk about. And I can glance over at it, come back to you and talk to you about it. Look them over here. Look back over at it. But you guys know that Taco Bell is selling wings now? Now, this is what I don't understand. It's like, why are people going to Taco Bell for wings, for chicken wings? Like, people don't go to Taco Bell for tacos. So why would you want to go to Taco Bell for chicken? Like, you're already risking it eating their not real beef. And now you're like trusting that this place that fucks up and makes you have diarrhea from a burrito is not going to make you have diarrhea from a chicken wing. It doesn't make any sense, guys. Don't do that. Don't do that. And the thing is, like, the point, like, this is an interesting thing. So I dated this black girl, and her advice was like, her grandma would always say, never eat at restaurants that sell multiple stuff. If they sell spaghetti and they also sell like hot wings, don't eat there. Because you don't want to eat food that like mixes that many different things. They need to stick to one idea. And I've always lived by that plan. I've always lived by that idea because I think that's a good idea. And that's one to think about, guys. That's one to live on. I think that's probably where I'm going to end this podcast, guys. So if you've gotten this far, you should like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you much for watching. If you have gotten this far, I'll see you guys on the next episode. It'll be episode 99. One more to 100. All right. Bye. I love you. Bye. See you later, Gator. Adios, muchacho. I'm going to go edit this podcast now. I don't know how to end this podcast. I don't know how to end this. My voice has like slightly been going out, in and out, but you know, it's not that big of a deal. All right. Well, bye.